Hello, couples, and welcome to the Empowered Couples Podcast, where here you're going to get modern, non-boring relationship advice that you can actually implement into your day-to-day life to communicate like pros, fight smarter, get on the same page, be a team, no matter what challenges you are facing in your relationship. And I am one of your hosts, Aaron Freeman.
And I'm Jocelyn Freeman, and can't wait to tell you this topic actually came from a message. So if you're new to listening, everything that we talk about comes from the community. DMs, posts on our social media, because we want to answer what's going on in your relationship. So this came from Aaron G. Shout out to Aaron, another Aaron. You got another friend. And he said, how can I get better at taking feedback from my partner? He said, I tend to get defensive and then it creates tension and it's awkward and we have a weird half day. So it's a great question and we're going to jump into that in a minute. But actually, his question was included in our drawing. It's the end of the month. So it's our monthly drawing where
that's right.
We include testimonials for the podcast, questions, anyone who shares on your stories or to your Instagram shares about the podcast. So Aaron actually won this one. We did the drawing right before this.
Yeah, congrats, Aaron, and thank you so much for your question. And then that's what brings us to this podcast today,
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Well, do you want to read a review?
Yeah, so we had other reviews this week. So I just want to shout out. We had Diana actually putting in a review and really loved this because she said, success is proactive, not reactive. Mm-hmm. Aaron and Jocelyn provide proactive relationship advice for those who wish to be more successful in their relationship. And get this, not just fix a relationship gone awry. Love that. I mean, I think that's one of the main principles that we try to share with couples. And then also she said, great for anyone wanting to improve their communication overall. This wisdom, Diana, thank you for calling this wisdom, can be implemented in business, in families, and more. And honestly, I think that is so true. Yeah. It's all relationships. And we bring skills to put into your relationship. Nothing's wrong here. You don't need to fix anything. It's about putting in the right skill.
Well said. So with that, thank you for the review. And getting back to the topic, right? Uncovering do you want to share them, kind of the agenda, what we're going to go down?
Yeah, so today's episode is actually how to take feedback better to not get defensive.
Ooh,
and the major difference between criticism and feedback, which we're really just going to explore ourselves. So today, what you're going to take away is, number one, what is that major difference between criticism and feedback? Secondly, how to receive feedback to not get defensive. And then lastly, how do you give feedback so that your partner doesn't get defensive? And then you're also building them up.
3 key elements. And to be honest with you, this was a lesson for us last. I'm just going to jump right into a little bit.
Yeah, please. It's funny. It's been, when we have chosen a topic, it has shown up for us these past 3 weeks.
It really has. And this one has been something we've been uncovering in our relationship. Ever since we started personal development, man, what do you think, 7 years ago
7
we
years,
started?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Once you learn a lot, it can be easy to just kind of notice things in each other and give feedback. And what happened last week was we actually realized we were giving too frequent a feedback. And that's one of the pain points. It isn't just the difference between criticism and feedback, which we're going to go into in a minute, but I wanted to share honestly, our love tanks felt pretty low last week. We were sitting outside. We're early birds. So it was like 5:45 in the morning. And I said to him, while I'm drinking my coffee, I said, to be honest, like my love tank feels low. Like I'm not, quote unquote, feeling the love the last few days. And I said, why do you think that is? And it was great. This is, again, one of the things. Tackle a challenge as a couple. And that's what we did. We got into a discovery. Why could our love tanks be low? Why weren't we feeling the love? And on the walk, you brought this up about the frequency of giving each other feedback. Do you want to share about that?
Yeah, well, there's criticism and then there's the feedback piece. And even if we were to say feedback can be positive, there is a way it can be given, like you're saying, too frequent, that feels just like we're going to talk about now, right?
Yeah.
It feels like you're just trying to change the other person.
Yeah.
And when you're getting feedback, we're going to share, obviously, how you give feedback so that it builds your partner up. When you're getting a lot of feedback, it can feel like your partner is wanting to change a lot of things about you. So then that makes me feel like I'm not the partner maybe that you want me to be, or that there's a lot of things you want me to change. And so I'm not doing things right. So that puts me and I could say any listener, in a place of being defensive. So when
Yeah.
the feedback is often, that's how I feel, and I think that's how a lot of partners feel too.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we really identified. And I don't know why it happened. Sometimes you won't always figure out why were we in a season, and it wasn't a long time. It was maybe a week or two that we were just more vocal with each other. Maybe it's the tension of what's going on in the world. I mean, just think about the kind of underlying stress that we're all under. So we were just making little remarks or little feedback to things that didn't really matter. But it was, rather than it being like twice a week feedback, it was like 3 times a day feedback, and that added up to feeling like, gosh, like, can't I just do good enough?
Oh, that's exactly. I know that was one of the things you brought up, and you were just saying it. It feels like I just can't do anything right.
Exactly. And so what we noticed was, all right, we're giving each other way too frequent of feedback. So what we implemented was, let's not give any for like a few days, and let's debrief our relationship later on this week. So we only said positive things to each other and have filled our tank back up, right? So you can counteract this kind of season of feeling disconnected or feeling like it has been too much feedback with doubling down on acknowledgement, affirmation. Hey, thanks so much for the way you did that. Anything you want to
Well, to your point, I just want to, for the audience, say you said we put in only positive things, where that brings us to sort of the difference between criticism and feedback. Feedback is meant to be a positive thing. So it's not just that we put in positive feedback. We only said uplifting things.
Yes.
Where feedback is, in a sense, and this is where we'll get to the point, criticism tears down.
Yes.
That's pretty clear.
Yep.
Feedback has the intent to build up,
Yeah.
but can be delivered in a way where it's not received that way.
Exactly.
And that's where we're going to touch more on,
Yeah.
right? So let's highlight criticism really quick, right? We know from the research done by like the Gottman Institute, decades, criticism is one of the main 4 things that will destroy a marriage.
True.
So criticism, tearing someone down. Talk a little bit about,
Yeah.
in this case, criticism. How do you differentiate if criticism is in a relationship versus feedback? But then we'll go into, then there's the way you give feedback so it can actually build up.
Absolutely. Okay, so a couple things that stood out to us. We actually were in a discovery about this before recording, kind of just making sure we even distinguish it in our relationship. When is it feedback with each other? When is it criticism? So criticism, one of the elements I really think is that, like you said, it is remarks that are labeling the person. You are this in a negative way. So you're defining person in a negative way that you're calling them something. That's one of the things I think, right? So it's like, you are so lazy. You don't do this
Jeez.
enough. I'm not saying that to you. You're not.
I know, but wow, that was deep.
But I mean, I think that's what I've heard some people say to each other, right? Is saying these labels of the person is a criticism, as opposed to feedback is labeling the behavior. Wouldn't you agree?
Sure, I'm just checking it out. It's like we're discovering it right now in the moment too.
Yeah.
No, I think of criticism, I think of it sounding this way. Some version of you're not doing that right, where feedback is going to be, here's where you can be better. So insert anything you want. It could be criticism throughout the day about the dishes, about how the kids are being parented, about how finances are being handled. It could be even criticism about, this is going to go link to other episodes, you could even have your own agreements around intimacy, right? Or time to connect, quality time. And you could give criticism by saying, you're not doing our agreement right. You said we put in place we were going to be intimate 4 times a week, and you haven't initiated. So it goes back to your point where you're also saying something is wrong about the person.
Yes.
Where to start to move it, at least out of criticism, obviously being something that we know definitely tears marriages down, is to move that from the person to the behavior.
Yeah, it's like, check it out. If you're listening to this, just think into your relationship and what has created tension, those remarks. Do you feel like it is constructive? That's what you want to really check out is what I'm saying to my partner actually because I want them to grow, because I see their potential, because I know where we can get better. Or is the criticism coming from a reactive place where, to be honest, sometimes it is because you want to make a little jab. Maybe you're feeling frustrated about something, so you're like, ooh, I'm going to make this little jab because I want them to feel something. I'm not saying that you're a malicious person, by no means, but sometimes as humans, we turn to criticism when we want them to feel something.
Well, let me ask you something. Totally get that. I don't think people are malicious by nature. So you might not be a malicious partner, but could you have malicious intent in a moment? I'm just checking that out.
I think if there's enough buildup of resentment and things not being talked about and you're not feeling heard and you're not understood, I think people resort to more offensive communication. Ooh, I just even kind of came up with that. It's like, all right, I'm not feeling heard. I'm not feeling like our relationship is good. And I need to get your attention. And so I'm going to say something offensive, hoping that it'll wake you up. That's not really constructive.
No.
So I think that's one thing. What else do you think is a difference between criticism and feedback?
I feel like I've hashed most of it out. It's really, trying to change someone like fundamentally. But I was going to ask you, why do we criticize our partner? I think it goes back to, and our upcoming book is going to have this in there, about it becomes a battle. It is me against you. And there is a period of time, whether it's years together or even a number of weeks in which the tank has gotten low, or you haven't expressed things to your partner, right? You've suppressed that, you held it in. That goes back to our model of withhold, withdraw, project. So you feel like you've been sort of torn down by your partner. So you can think of your self-confidence. How about that? Your self-confidence is down. So when you're against somebody else, how do you build up your own confidence again? The easiest way is to tear someone else down. Yeah. You don't make yourself bigger. You make someone else smaller.
So true.
Really, think about that. We really do that because that's an easier path. Yeah. But if you think about it, maybe most of the criticism comes from having low confidence in the relationship, in myself. But in turn, what if I went about building my own self up first, or even making requests of my partner to help me build myself up, rather than the easy way out, in a sense, right, is to bring someone else down? And how often do we see that? Honestly, going back to Diane's review from the podcast, this is in business, this is in relationships, your family, coworkers, strangers. It's out there in life. Yeah. How often, because of a low self-esteem or self-confidence, do we just tear other people down? And I've heard this in business too. It's like, why don't you just try to build the tallest building you can rather than just tear everyone else's building down? Yeah. You have a one-story building that you built in a city, and then you're just going to demolish everyone else's so you have the tallest building. But why wouldn't you look and say, how do I grow my building? How do I grow my self-confidence, my self-esteem within myself first?
I love that perspective. It actually made me even think of another, in our experience, like the subtle difference between me giving you feedback and criticism is also like, am I triggered or not? So it can be more criticism if I'm unconsciously triggered. We go into this deep into our next book, February 2021, by the way. And when you're triggered, that's when you can resort to criticism. And I want to make sure this is really clear. Feedback in a relationship, when done well, which we're going to talk about in just a minute, is a part of a healthy relationship. Criticism, unless it is a few and far between and it's just, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, I was in a triggered state, I so apologize for that criticism. Frequent criticism is not to be tolerated in your relationship. I want to make sure you know that you don't deserve to be in a relationship where someone is criticizing you. That is not okay. And if that is what you're experiencing in your relationship, the two of you must learn to shift your language to be more compassionate.
And probably seek support.
Absolutely. Get some support, because like you said in the beginning, from research, criticism is one of those deadly things in a relationship when it's long term. So I just want to make sure that everyone's clear that you don't deserve to be in a relationship where there is ongoing criticism.
Yeah, totally agree. And I like how you said that, because in the beginning, someone listening could have said, whoa, she's giving me proof while this relationship isn't the one I should be in. But that's not what you said. You said you need to come together. Yes. And you need to face this criticism thing together on the same side and put things in place, listen more to this podcast, get the skills to put in place together as a team, get support so that you sort of do combat this pattern of criticism together.
Absolutely.
So to round this section out, it sounds like also what you're saying is the difference between criticism and feedback can also be seen in what is your underlying intent.
Yes.
So close us out. What would the intent be around criticism versus what would your intent be around feedback?
Well, I think we even talked about like the intent with criticism is I'm maybe feeling some pain, so I want to inflict a little bit of pain in you. And it
So
might
your
not
intent is
tearing someone down.
okay.
You know, it's I want to kind of give you a little jab. And it's not always conscious. You're not sitting there going, I'm going to give them criticism because I want to tear them down. It's a fear-based triggered thing, right? When you're labeling the person.
Ooh, one more level. So is your intent, right? If you say it's to cut or tear someone else down, why do you do that? It's so you feel better about yourself.
Right.
Right? So maybe that's another level. I don't know, I'm just making this up. Maybe that's it. If my intent is to try to make myself feel better at the expense of someone else.
Absolutely.
And unfortunately, often it can come at the expense of our partner.
But again, it's like, it's unconscious. So if you're listening to this and going, oh man, I'm guilty. I've been criticizing my partner. It's okay. You're not a terrible person. You've just been unconsciously doing it. That's why you're listening to this podcast. That's why we work with couples, because you weren't necessarily taught the difference. And so don't like shame yourself now if you've been falling more and giving criticism. Shift to now feedback, which again, to round this out, is more of a, hey, I want to build you up. Hey, I noticed something that could make you even better, and you're contributing to each other's self-development. It's more out of love than out of fear. So do we want to go now into how to receive feedback?
Yes.
Better? Not receive criticism. Again, that's not that's not kosher in the relationship, but when your partner's truly giving you feedback, how do we receive it better?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, the first part is, I think, know the reasons why you get defensive. So to receive feedback is to first look at yourself before you get into a conversation with your partner and try to come to agreements on how to give each other feedback. So talk a little bit about that. How do you realize the places that cause you defensiveness? And that's, which is really why you can't receive feedback. You can't receive it if you get defensive immediately.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about the reasons.
Well, and that's exactly what Aaron was asking in the question, was like, how do I not get defensive when I'm getting feedback? So defensiveness, for me, just even sharing, and this is what we notice when we're talking to couples as well, is that it's coming from this underlying, must not be good enough. One of our fundamental fears as a human being is not being accepted and being abandoned. And so when your partner's giving you feedback and you're getting defensive, even though they might be doing it because they see your potential, if you're defensive, it's because something is firing in your brain going, oh my gosh, does this mean I'm not good enough? Does this mean what I'm doing is not enough? And that's just, again, I hear so many human beings say, it's just still not enough what I'm doing. Anything more you'd add to that?
Well, I wanted to bring this up too. So about receiving feedback. And when I think of it for myself, if I'm receiving feedback, then the place that I'm currently in is sort of being resisted by my partner. Or if I'm getting feedback, isn't it really a resistance in myself to change?
Yes.
So when I think about that, if I'm defensive about something, then I'm sort of resisting changing or evolving or transforming. So it's almost like I'm stuck in the way that I'm being, and the person that I am is just fine.
Which is ego.
I'm good here. Don't try to change me. I've arrived. I've arrived is kind of a personal development term, like I've maybe done the work, or you just need to accept who I am. And maybe that's a belief, right? It's like, it's going to be harder for you, right, to receive feedback if you have a belief for yourself that you don't need to grow. The way you are is fine, and don't try to change me. This is who I am. Accept me or leave me.
Yeah, and like you said, I just want to, it's the ego, which we all have, and that ego is from fear and going, like it's all rejecting something that could actually be positive. And it actually reminded me, and I know we mentioned this even a little bit on a recent podcast of this, I know that in the past, I used to get defensive as well from feedback. And I still do. I still get defensive once in a while. We're all still in a work in progress. But a lot of times I associated feedback with punishment from being a child. And I'm sure like you can even think back to times where your parents were giving you feedback and it felt harsh. So we often have in our mind collapsed punishment with feedback. And that primal resistance to, oh my gosh, it's triggering in me this feeling of my partner's punishing me.
Yeah. You know, I don't want this to dovetail us, but we don't often go back to things from the past per se, but when you think of it, I just thought of this, the educational system. You're a kid, you get graded in every area, right? There's probably even a point like in second or first grade where you get graded on how you were at recess, right? Like A through F. So I think the educational system kind of implants this belief that getting feedback is going to be good or bad. If I get feedback and I got all A's in recess, in PE, in math, in science, and English, then okay, that was good. And I'm good. But if you get a report card, feedback, and you got an F or D, what does that mean about you as a kid? You're not as good as the other kids.
Right.
You're bad. You need to work on these things. So I would say that almost that belief is instilled early on that when you get feedback, hopefully I turn out to be good, rather than if I'm getting feedback where I'm a D or a F, then I'm bad.
And you know what? That reminded me of how much feedback for people is associated with taking it personally. Like that what you're saying, while it's constructive, is something personal to you as like a human being, like the essence of who you are is not good enough, rather than, and this is something we really got in a really powerful leadership program we went through, where it was, hey, it's not you as a fundamental person, it's the action, which is not you. You can alter your action to be more effective. Or it's, hey, what you could do just could have a slight difference. And that's a big thing. People take so much personally. Again, that whole like, I must not be doing good enough. Oh, my partner still doesn't think what I'm doing is good enough. Man, is this ever going to end?
Yeah. It made me think of one other thing too. You don't have to be good at everything.
Yeah.
And I think that's also one of the things the educational system does is you need to get all of your grades to like a B or an A. But think about this. Albert Einstein as a little kid. Imagine he was in a school where he got like a report card. I don't know if he was or not. Yeah, but so imagine he gets the A in science and math, but he gets an F in what? Like PE or even being social probably. So that he would have a meeting with the parents saying, oh, you got to get little Albert Einstein more social to interact with people. I mean, how bad would that have been for generations after? Imagine trying to force Albert Einstein to not focus on math and science where he's already good, but to get better at kickball. I mean, honestly, who cares? But aren't we doing the same thing when we're taking feedback from our partners or even from work or any place? You don't have to be good at everything. So when someone gives you feedback, what if you just said, man, you're so right. I'm actually just not that good at that area. And that's not one that is linked to my skill set or my natural abilities. So that's another thing I feel. You don't have to feel like you have to be good at everything. So could you take feedback and realize there are areas I'm definitely not good. And I just don't have the skills in that. But then you can choose, do you want to grow in that area? Or is your particular mission and purpose in life set on something else? Yeah. In which case, if someone's giving you feedback, great. I really appreciate that. And that's not an area that I'm actually focused on for the betterment of myself, the relationship, or the people I'm out to impact.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is a summary for like receiving feedback before we go into giving is it's not personal. It's not about you as a fundamental person. So when your partner is giving you feedback that's actually meant to be constructive, what if you just said, like you said right now, hey, thank you so much. That is an area I could get better. Wow, I didn't even notice that. You know, I that was something I didn't even have my eyes on. Wow, thank you. So it's like it's seeing everything as constructive. It's all perception. My partner loves me. They see a place that I could have done something slightly different or it could have been more effective. Awesome. I love that. So it's not personal. Set aside ego defenses that you're not good enough. It's not about you not being good enough. I mean, again, that is such a primal part of us. It isn't that you're not good enough. It's just, hey, Could have been slightly different. Any other summary points from the receiving?
Well, I would just say that evolution, and I could get scientific here, right? Where everything is literally moving from non-form and energy into form and back out. Now, we call that like life and death, what it's happening between the soil and trees and the clouds, right? Even water vapor is going from vapor to a dense cloud to rain to ice and then evaporating again, right? Like literally evolution and changing form is the most natural thing in the universe. So don't resist that, because it's the same for you as a human being. If you can't take feedback, it's probably that you're also resisting the evolution of who you are as a human being, the evolution of society, of your own relationship. So if you get to a place where you feel like the relationship is where I've always wanted it to be, and I'm now stuck and I'm also attached to it staying like this, you're going to be in for a surprise. You're going to be in for things being tough. I think when you release that and say, well, we're always evolving to be even better people, even more connected, even better communicators, then all of a sudden it's like the feedback is the thing that helps you get there.
Yep. I love that. Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Mic drop.
All right.
Now.
Not this mic, though. Don't drop this one.
Yeah, don't drop. This is really nice mic. But going now to giving feedback. I was actually just having these memories of the times where we do get defensive with each other when we're giving true feedback. Again, when it's true feedback, not criticism, is this key element. Write this down, everybody. When you didn't ask permission.
Yep.
It is the key piece. So let's say you notice something in your partner and you're like, ooh, maybe that's not aligned with who they want to be. Maybe they aren't aware of that. I want to give them this feedback. If you just go in, and we call it blindsiding them, and just blindside them, our human self is more likely to do fight or flight and defend ourselves. So what you want to do is you want to go to your partner, ask permission. Hey, I noticed something. I think this could be a way that you could really grow, or I just noticed how this could be slightly improved. Can I give you that feedback? Is now a good time? That permission is so key, isn't it?
Yeah. It is with your permission that you literally let down the defenses.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That's
and one
good.
thing about it, anytime you've said yes, now we could have a whole other conversation about a commitment yes versus a comply yes. So that would be one thing, actually, for you as giving feedback, when you get the yes, or when you're receiving it, not just a comply. Okay, yeah, give me feedback. But what's happening internally is you're like, I don't want to hear this. So your yes has to be one of commitment. And in that case, if it's not the right time for you, the person receiving it, when you have requested, I would want to say, hey, now isn't really the best time. But then don't just leave it, right? Say, hey, is it something we can return to? Is it something that you really need to share with me?
Could we talk about it tonight or tomorrow? Yeah, absolutely. So as the person giving the feedback, get their permission 100%. Second piece is, don't give feedback in the heat of an emotion. So let's say something you're noticing and maybe it's bothering you. Well, number one, check out why it's bothering you. What's it triggering in you? What's it bringing up? But it can start to feel like criticism and not feedback if you're saying it in an emotional state. And so go to them in a calm state, truly with the energy of, I am your partner. I love you. And I just see a place that we could be even better.
Well, to summarize this is actually to state the positive intent.
Yeah, good.
So to your point, the first one, ask permission. And then when you get the commitment yes, then you want to first state what your positive intent is.
Which could sound like, hey, my intent for giving you this feedback is actually, I know it's something we've been wanting to work on, so I'm committed to us growing. Or, hey, my intent with this is that I know we have a big goal in this area and I just want to support our goal with this. So I want to give you this feedback. Or, hey, my intent with this is that we're even more honest with each other, that we're able to give each other positive feedback. So it's the tone in which you start the feedback.
And I also want to underline something here, that you share the benefit for us. So it is more of a we thing. So it's not you need to change. It is, here's the positive intent. And then ultimately it is so that we are more connected. We experience more intimacy together. Yep. We're more effective in our business. We are better parents to our kids. So it's all of that. Have it be more inclusive.
Absolutely. I love that so much. I think that really captures it. I mean, if you all focus just on those points for both receiving and giving, that's going to make a massive difference in your experience of feedback with each other, so that feedback can ultimately be about you growing, about you being that power couple team that you're out to be. You know, I know that I have learned so much from your feedback, because I'm in my body, so I can't always see myself, right? And so feedback can be really beautiful and really supportive of your growth and your transformation, hence why you listen to something like this podcast, because you're committed to growth. And so I don't think there's anything more to share besides those.
Well, I had one more thing,
Okay.
and that was, there might be someone listening that's saying, well, there's a couple of things I can take away and implement with my partner, but what if I've also done a few of these things and my partner just keeps on saying that they're not open to feedback? They don't want to hear. They've been saying that for a week. They've been saying that for a month. I don't want to hear feedback. That's just a question I feel like could be out there. So anything you would say to that?
Well, I guess I'd need a minute to think about that off the cuff, because I would be interested to hear from them. Like, I might ask them, hey, do you mind sharing, why you don't want feedback? Tell me a little bit about what feedback means to you. So I would get a little bit curious from my partner of just, hey, tell me a little bit, like, what is feedback? Did feedback not feel good when you were growing up? And I would just want to learn more about how they perceive it. What about you?
Well, there is one thing for an individual that is growing in a particular area, like maybe around their spirituality, maybe they had the intent to be a better parent in a certain way. It could be maybe you want to be a better speaker or better podcaster, like whatever it is. I think if you came to your partner and said all the things we mentioned, but then also, hey, this was an area that you said was important to you.
Mm-hmm.
So in that case, it's like what happens emotionally, what happens in your own state is you're reminded of this is something that you've put forth for yourself.
Yeah.
So your partner isn't putting this on you to try to change you, to try to fix you, all the things that we talked about. It's a reminder like, oh yeah, this is something that I've chosen. So it's a support.
Yeah.
Well, if your partner brings it up and it's something that you have actually chosen to work on, all of a sudden that should be a support to you. So that being said, the last piece I would say is if they keep on saying that they don't want feedback, then it might be a question of, well, is that an area that you still are wanting to work on then? Or has the area changed?
Yeah, great question. I think that's all. And actually, it's really powerful if you don't have to be the one always giving your partner feedback. So it actually just is teeing me up for, I actually want to invite you all to be in a community that's a safe space for your relationship, where we can kind of give the feedback. And we're actually starting our next round of the Power Couple Book Club coming up. If you're new to, being in our world, we every once in a while do a round of 30 days. Couples join this community. You get a free copy of our book. So literally, we pay for the cost of the book. You just cover shipping. And not only do you get that book, but you get access to a community. And we do 30 days of gratitude challenges. We're doing a brand new connection challenge.
Ooh.
There's 3 workshops on conflict, communication, and we're doing another surprise one, I guess we can tell them, on emotional triggers and handling that differently. So let us be the ones to give you and your partner the feedback on the workshop. And they're super interactive. People are asking a ton of questions on those workshops. So join that. All you do is go to thenewpowercouple.com or go to the link in the show notes. It's starting here in just a couple weeks, so it'll be mid-July. So go soon, because once it starts, we get into the challenges. There's prizes, giveaways.
Yeah, you want to be in there from the beginning.
Absolutely. So go to that like ASAP, order it. Again, we cover the cost of the book. You just cover shipping, thenewpowercouple.com.
Yeah. Well, let's summarize here today. So we were talking about how to take feedback better to not get defensive, and the major difference between criticism and feedback, which that was the first part we covered, criticism versus feedback, the summary being one mostly tears down, where feedback in the right way builds up.
Yep.
So then in receiving the feedback, what were some of the summary points you took away?
Well, you want to remember it's not personal. You want to remember that they're just wanting you to grow. And you talked about how growth is inevitable. Change, evolution, there's nothing wrong. It's not about you not being good enough and you need to change. It's that as human beings, fundamentally, we're meant to change.
Yeah. And then that led us into giving feedback, in which case you want to state your positive intent. You want to ask permission, and then also see if you can label the behavior and not the person.
Great reminder. Absolutely. So with that, before you sign off, actually, if you want to participate in the next drawing as well,
Yes.
please write a review. Honestly, the reviews make such a difference. It helps us reach more couples. So you just scroll to the bottom of the podcast page, write a review. You can win a prize next month, or send us a question that you want us to cover. We get DMs, comments constantly on Instagram. We're super engaged on there. We respond to every single message that we get. So ask us what you'd like us to cover. Share about it. Share on your stories. It literally means the world to us, and you get entered in the next drawing.
Yeah, and Diana, thank you so much for your review that we read here about proactive versus reactive. And then shout out to Aaron G. once again. So for submitting his question in our group, we did the podcast today. He was the drawing winner. So once again, if you review also, then it also helps other couples hear this type of advice, implement into their relationship. And that's a way you can help influence other couples.
Absolutely. All right, everyone. We can't wait to connect with you on the next episode. Talk to you soon.